All right, hello, guys and girls. This is Sean Longkey, your host of the Midnight Highway Radio. What you're about to watch is an interview I conducted with Dr. Lynne about the Phoenix Lights. Now, this took place in Phoenix, obviously, in 1997, and I believe it was March 13th. I really hope you guys and girls enjoy this video, this interview I conducted. The very beginning, I apologize. The audio's a little off. It's when I'm coming back. See, you don't actually hear that on this. This isn't the original copy. So I had to splice it up a little bit, or else I would get copyrighted because I had music in there. So I had to take it out. So you're going to hear a little bit. It's going to sound weird, like for 30 seconds, and then the interview takes place, and it's all good. But real quick, guys, please subscribe to the channel if you like this content. Like the video as well and comment. I really like to hear you guys and girls' comments below. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? What do you think about the subject? I'm very open to constructive criticism. Just be respectful, guys. I want you to be safe out there. We are living in a time where the world changes 360 degrees in 24 hours. Every 24 hours. It's a different world we wake up to. I know you're quarantined. I know you're going insane. You're probably sick of watching YouTube videos and all that, Netflix. But hopefully this will give you guys and girls a little bit of entertainment as you are stuck in your house. Be safe. Follow the CDC guidelines. Guys, the social distancing is huge. We really got to keep the spread down. This is a very, very serious moment in time that we are living in, okay? We are. Note that. You are very important right now. All of us are. We're in an extreme moment in time. And I don't know how it's going to end. Who knows? Maybe aliens will actually show up during this pandemic. You never know. All right, guys. Peace. Alright, guys and girls, welcome back. You are tuned in to the Midnight Highway Radio. Tonight we got a very special guest, Dr. Lynne. How are you?
I'm terrific. Thank you so much for the nice introduction, Sean. It's great to be with you. And just to be clear, I actually pushed my entire medical career aside for 4 years to try to find a logical source and meaning for what I had witnessed up close and personal, and then thousands witnessed on March 13th, 1997, and stayed anonymous for 7 years until I came forward in 2004, and while I was working at the Arizona Heart Institute. And then actually, once I squeezed the best of what I found from a 750-page journal to 230 pages, and came forward in March of 2004, and then started doing work on the documentary, our internationally award-winning documentary, and had to make a choice, and left the Arizona Heart Institute in June of 2004, and I haven't stopped since. I've actually been researching, investigating, and documenting these incredibly interesting and anomalous phenomena for 15 years, actually 17 years, 2 years before the mass sighting. My husband, who's also a physician, and I had a very close sighting to our home, and I got pictures, captured pictures of that as well. If anyone wants to get on the website, thephoenixlights.net, and go on to the photo page, you'll see the unique collection that I accumulated and in good conscience ultimately could not stick in a drawer. So finally came forward in 2004, and there is so much more to the story than the public has heard, and many people still. It's 15 years later after the Arizona mass sighting, which has become historic and world known. And people are still just finding out about it. So I'm happy to be with you today to share some of that.
Yeah, believe it or not, I mean, there's some people on Facebook and people that have emailed me that haven't even heard of the Phoenix Lights. And I'm like, wow. But like you said, there are some people out there. So no regrets in your transition of life?
Actually, it's been an incredible adventure, and just like you said, I mean, the event that happened here 15 years ago, statewide and beyond, for many, many hours. There is so much mis and disinformation out there that we can get into, but I have to say that it's the most documented, most well-documented, and the most widely seen anomalies, aerial anomalies in modern history. And once you really start getting into the story, you can understand how important this is, because to date, and I have gone to extreme lengths to have my own data not only analyzed and authenticated, but also explained to me, and to date, there is no explanation. These things are worldwide. They've been happening for centuries, and it's time we get this out in the open and address it, accept it, and study it so we can move forward and not only find out who's driving these things, but also move forward in our own evolution. And I have to say that even coming forward as a physician was really important to me, because ultimately I realized, because I am an experiencer, I did see it up close and personal, and nobody can take that away. And even though most things can be explained, only a small percentage of anomalies cannot. When something happens to you out of the ordinary, which is so out of your realm of reality, it changes your life forever. You want answers, and I'm sure there's many people out there that can empathize with that. And I have to say, the more I dug, the more I found such incredibly credible information that these phenomena have been with us since human documentation began. If you go back, not only finding primitive caves in Pakistan and Peru that have long extinct animals etched out in the stone, there's also in the sky what we would call today a UFO. How did they know that unless they were documenting something that they had seen? And certainly in the Bible, Sumerian writings and other writings worldwide, centuries ago, they were describing these phenomena. Even in indigenous cultures around the world, which I found out actually after looking at my data. If you look at the photo page, you'll see that my photographs are showing that these phenomena are popping up in the same location, which is actually where South Mountain, which is just south of the airport, Sky Harbor International Airport, and then some miles back are the Estrella Mountain Range, and in between, this is an interesting little aside, in between the basin, between South Mountain and the Estrellas, is the Gila River Indian Reservation. And I have to share, too, Sean, that there were so many serendipitous events that have happened connected with the Phoenix Lights that I have come not to believe in coincidence, and this was one of them. About 6 months before the mass sighting, and not only did I work at the Arizona Heart Institute, but I also have a company that produces video and workbook curriculums on the reality of vital health issues like AIDS and teen pregnancy and substance abuse for schools worldwide. Discovery Education is distributing them as we speak. And I was invited to present my substance abuse prevention program at the Gila River Indian Reservation in the basin in between South Mountain and the Estrellas 6 months before the mass sighting. They have one school. And I helped them out, and they usually don't share intimacies with outsiders, but since I did get friendly with them after the mass sighting, I noticed that my pictures consistently showed that these lights were appearing, in that general area. So I called them up and I said, "Did anybody see strange lights during the mass sighting on March 13th?" And they started to giggle. And I said, "Is that funny?" Are you kidding? We've been looking up at them for centuries. Not only were they looking up at them right over their heads on March 13th, which is overpopulated area, so they definitely weren't military, but they've been looking up at them for centuries. They call them sky people, light beings. I had no idea. I mean, that was the first that I heard of this, and when I started investigating that part of the story, I was finding that indigenous cultures worldwide believe that there are other intelligences along with ours in other dimensions, and whether they're spirit world, ancestors, some of them believe that come to give them guidance and comfort and inspiration. Others, even here in Arizona, the Hopi, have protocols that actually invite these intelligences in. They're not scared of them. They believe that they're here and among us, and it's just fascinating when you look at that end of the story. But then, when you start really looking into the history of these things, and you see that not only in the 15th and 16th centuries there are frescoes and paintings that depict people on the ground looking up at the sky, and there's a blatant UFO with even beings in the UFO in the sky. How did they even get that idea? And certainly 100 years, actually, before our mass sighting, which is very interesting in and of itself, in April of 1897, and our mass sighting was March of 1997. There were reports not only in Kansas but also California,
Aurora, Texas,
and Canada, of a massive airship, they called it, that had movable lights. Now, when I get into some of the descriptions on March 13th, there were almost identical descriptions during the mass sighting, and this was 6 years before the Wright brothers took flight.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, we're going back to Aurora, Texas.
Exactly, and then you fast forward to World War II, and you have the Foo Fighters, which is not the band, but the Foo Fighters, which we actually have in our documentary in the bonus features now a genuine French World War II Foo Fighter pilot who saw these orbs, just as my husband and I saw outside our window, that were flying around their aircraft, and each side thought the other side had this advanced spy technology. And it wasn't until after World War II that Japan and Germany and the United States tried to study these things, and everybody found out that nobody had this advanced technology, spy technology, so they came from somewhere. And then, we have lots of really credible data. I mean, not only the flyover in 1952 over the White House, as well as the Lubbock lights in the 50s, and then we get to the Hudson Valley sighting in the 60s, and then shoot up to the 80s when you have these giant triangle craft, very similar phenomena to the Phoenix lights in UK and Belgium. Actually, Belgium came to the United States and asked, "Are you doing this?" And the United States flatly denied that we were. And they're really a model for what should happen, because the university, the government, military, and scientists and civilians all join forces to try to study these things. That's what should happen. And certainly we've had other sightings even since the mass sighting in Arizona, not only in Arizona, but the Stephenville lights in 2008 and other very similar sightings worldwide, which is amazing, because when I came forward in 2004, the official and the only explanation, which we can get into, which has still not been substantiated, even though they tried to reenact it with a flare drop, and they dismally failed. The military failed to reenact it. They've never been reenacted. But the only explanation when I came forward in 2004 was that the Phoenix lights were merely military illumination flares, and there's still people that feed into that, and that's okay. Everyone in their own time, and if, as soon as somebody says that to me, I have to laugh inside and say, you just have not looked at the data, because there is so much data to the contrary, and now that we've gotten that out there, in the past 8 years, it's amazing, and it's not just myself. Other people have come forward of credence, including our own governor, who mocked the sighting in 1997, came forward 10 years later to say that he actually saw it, and we can get into that if we have time. But the point is that now worldwide, when people see similar phenomena, these orbs or giant massive V or triangle craft, they equate it with the Phoenix light. So this is something that's just been growing and growing and growing, and I've actually been growing with it. So the book is in its third print. The latest edition actually has a chapter of what's happened since I came forward in 2004, the new sightings, our governor. We have new witnesses that are amazing. A 911 police operator from Phoenix police operator that was on that night finally retired, and she's really sharing all. And we have pilots and military. I mean, just some wonderful people have come forward to really substantiate that something really, really important and extraordinary happened in Arizona on March 13th. And if you'd like to know more about that, I can get into the details.
Oh, yeah. We're going to go pretty deep here in this interview. And I'll tell you what, Doctor, one thing that gets me is, we're calling you doctor, and we're on here talking about UFOs. A credible, intelligent individual such as yourself is on here talking about this, not mocking it like if you see on Fox News or CNN. I've actually seen clips of you on Fox News,
people kind of giggle when you talk about ETs or UFOs, and it's good to have people like yourself that are actually out there taking the subject serious, because it's a very real phenomenon that's taking place right now. And earlier when you mentioned about the White House, I believe that was over the Capitol building in
right, 1952.
1952. Isn't that amazing?
Right.
It's almost like they are kind of mocking us. You know what I mean?
Well, on the other side, and I always try to be positive, maybe they're just trying to make us aware of their presence in a non-threatening way. And I have to say, in 15 years, and I just look at the data. I mean, I let it speak for itself. I've tried to be as scientific as I possibly can with it. And like you said, and I appreciate your words, I mean, I take this very seriously. I saw this up close and personal. I got photographs of it. I've gone to extreme lengths to have it explained to me. University of Arizona Optical Science Department, Consciousness Study Department, ASU, Arizona State University, Geology, Anthropology, Mathematics, and Brooks Institute of Photography. I mean, besides Navy optical physicist Dr. Bruce Maccabee and Village Labs here, Jim Delatoso. I mean, there have been dozens of people who have studied my data, and to date there is no explanation. Plus, I have to tell you, there has not been not one in over 15 years, and I'm pretty intimately involved with the investigation. And there are people here that also do therapy for people who have had experiences, and there has not been not one report of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights event. So that in itself is telling. And for anybody out there that's not familiar with what happened here on March 13th, 1997, while thousands of people were looking skyward for a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet that was very clear in the northwest sky that night. They also caught a glimpse of 1 to 2 mile wide, in some very credible reports, either orbs, the balls of light that seemed to be attached to something, totally equidistant from each other, but they couldn't quite see what it was attached to, in a V shape, or boomerang, some people say, or actual craft. And if you go on the website and you look on the GAP page, GAP, Geospatial Animation Project, that is a 12-year compilation. I mean, there is so much data here that's credible and that's been compiled for years. Over 12 years from the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, Washington, hundreds of reports to Peter Davenport, as well as to Village Labs here, which was the clearinghouse locally, Arizona MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and then Councilwoman Vice Mayor Frances Barwood, who, by the way, was the only elected official at the time, that months later in a May meeting, and the sighting happened in March, just happened to mention it because so many of her constituents and some of the media were asking her why wasn't there an investigation, happened to mention it, and she was just plastered. I mean, anybody that came forward at the time was really ridiculed, particularly in the paper. And so I was very happy to stay out of this. But anyway, while people are looking at this very low gliding, and by the way, if you look at the GAP page, just to finish that off, there are 8 or 9 different craft that people were seeing. Now, whether it was one craft, and we're talking thousands and thousands of people over many, many hours. We have reports starting at 3 p.m. in the afternoon in Phoenix. We also have, in Arizona, we also have reports at 5:30 in New Mexico by Native Americans, 7:15 in California, 11:30. There was actually a commercial airline crew and 140 passengers that were passing Las Vegas and saw the same phenomena hovering over Las Vegas, like hovering Las Vegas, and that's a very interesting story in and of itself. I have that in my book now. They just came forward anonymously to share what happened to them, which is pretty poignant. And then about 3 a.m. that next morning, there was a call by an alleged crewman to look at Luke Air Force Base to the National UFO Reporting Center, and it's all recorded and very detailed. We have some of the recording in the documentary, and certainly I tell about it in the book. And what he says, in essence, is that one of these craft was hovering over the middle of Phoenix at about 8:30 that evening. And military jets were sent out to either intercept it or get gun down or some whatever. And as they got close, not only did their instrumentation inside the cockpit go haywire, which we've heard over and over again when these phenomena are close. But as they got closer, the lights dimmed, and then the whole thing disappeared, and freaked out one of the pilots, who this crewman said he helped out of his aircraft. I also have a report about 5:30 the next morning from a Boeing crew that was coming into work at Sky Harbor International Airport and saw one of these crafts hovering over their tarmac. So this was happening for many, many hours, and there were many, many things happening. Not only were there craft, and like I said, there were 8 or 9 different craft, and whether it was one craft that could morph into looking differently, or it was a parade of different craft, because there were different things going on at the same time, and the investigators here truly believe that there was a parade going throughout the state, or it was a perspective from where the person was standing. We may never know. But the fact is that there was a lot going on. I mean, not only were people seeing either these lights that seemed to be attached to something or craft, very low altitude. I mean, we're talking, some people said rooftop altitude, that they could have thrown a rock at it. It was that low. Totally silent. That was what was so eerie to everyone, because it didn't even displace the air, whatever the phenomena was. Some people saw it take off in blink speed and no sonic boom, nothing, just total silence. And some people actually saw, just like in 1897 with that phenomena, actually saw these orbs detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and then redock with it. So there were many, many things happening, and it was really an extraordinary event that touched people at a very, very deep level. That's the other thing. That doesn't happen with flares and blimps. And
right. Now, Doctor, I wanted to ask you this. The famous photograph that's floating around the Internet, you always see those several lights that look like they're about to sink down beyond the mountain peak there. Is that the military flares, or is that the actual craft?
That's a really good question, Sean. That's a really good question, because there were only a handful of us. Now, you have to realize, and people ask me all the time, why weren't there more pictures? Well, besides the fact that I am the only one that has 35-millimeter photographs of these phenomena prior to, during, and after the mass sighting. What's interesting about the mass sighting is that, first of all, in '97, we had those big clunky cell phones, and not that many people had them to begin with, but they didn't have cameras in them, okay? So, people, unless they happened to have a camera with them, didn't have a camera when they're out and about, and lots of people were out and about looking up at the sky at the Hale-Bopp comet also. And by the way, as an aside, when there are celestial happenings like an eclipse or whatever, like happened in 1991 in Mexico, for some reason people also are seeing UFOs. So, whether they know that we're looking up at the sky or whatever, that's a little coincidence.
Isn't there a lunar eclipse tonight? Transit of Venus tomorrow.
Right, so I tell people, keep looking up. You're going to see stuff. And most things can be explained, okay? But, you may see something and have a 35-millimeter camera with you. Now, I happen to be photographing these things for 2 years prior. Now, 2 years before the mass sighting, we had a very close sighting to our home, which I captured pictures of. I had no idea, didn't know nothing about this topic at all, not interested at all, didn't even know who to show the pictures to, and wondered for 2 years what this advanced technology was doing right outside our bedroom window. Now, when they came back again 2 months after the mass sighting, I was prepared. I grabbed my camera and I started photographing. In fact, the second night, I caught the same phenomena that I would capture on video during the mass sighting, head on, turning into a V shape. You can see those pictures on the photo page on the PhoenixLights.net website. And it's miraculous. It was so unnerving. And by the way, the second picture is exactly what people would describe during the mass sighting as 5 lights in a V shape with 2 trailing. And that's my second picture 2 months before the mass sighting, okay? But anyway, it was so unnerving that I called around and found air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport the next morning. This is 2 months before the mass sighting, and they saw the same thing at the same time. In fact, one of them was a meteorologist and described them as 6 points of light totally equidistant from each other, massive span, over a mile wide, that turned against the wind. And I actually got pictures as this was happening, and then moved as a unit behind South Mountain, which is just south of the airport. And when I asked, so what was it? There was silence, and then one of them said, "Beats me." And I said, "You're air traffic controllers. You're supposed to know what's in our air." They had no idea. Okay, and this was actually, they were alarmed when they saw this, because it did not show up on radar. It was in Class B restricted airspace. There's a 30-mile radius around the center of the airport, that anyone that comes into that airspace must call into the tower, especially if you're 1,000 feet altitude, as these phenomena were, and no one called in. So they were alarmed, okay? And we kept in contact up into and including March 13th. Again, when thousands of people were looking skyward, not many people had cameras with them. Some people tried that did have cameras, did try to take pictures of this massive thing, but it was so huge and so black that it blocked out the stars, and the pictures did not turn out. Now, to get back to your question, there was a handful of us around 10 o'clock, and this is where the confusion, I'll tell you, whoever came up with the explanation of flares was brilliant, because there was a handful of us that took video around 10 o'clock. Mine is the 3 points of light, like the end points of a giant V or triangle with thousands reported for hours before and after. One was an arrowhead that was taken of 5 lights that was taken just about the time that I took mine. This was before 10 o'clock, okay, shortly before 10 o'clock. And then about a half hour later, 20 minutes, a half hour later, there were 2 boomerang videos. And I think the one that you're referring to is one of the boomerangs. Now, one of the boomerang videos I've never used in anything because it looks a little haphazard, and I've really tried to be so precise with the data. So, it could be flares. But the one that they show all the time, okay, is so equidistant and so rock solid. Flares cannot do that, okay? Flares cannot stay in an equidistant line or formation. They drift and drop with the wind. They have huge smoke trails, and they're illuminated by the flare itself. And when you really look at the data, it speaks for itself. But anyway, getting back to that video, and I know exactly what you're referring to. There was a show, and I have this in my book. There was a show that came into town. Now, this is months after the mass sighting. There was no investigation, no explanation at all. It was uncanny. I mean, here this thing. I mean, even a public safety issue, as Councilman Barwood brought up in the council meeting, and nobody's doing anything. Nobody's saying anything. It was just bizarre. And until now, when you see how the story unfolds, and again, most people have no clue about this unless they've read my book. When a USA Today article came out on June 18th, 1997, this is months later, front page, opened up the sighting to international scrutiny. We were deluged by media from all over the world. And they, too, once they started talking to the witnesses, their descriptions were so detailed and so heartfelt. They, too, were saying, how can there not be an investigation? What's going on here? There must be some kind of explanation to this. And, I have to say, the very next day, now listen to how this puzzle piece fits. The very next morning, the former governor, Fife Symington, calls an unscheduled press conference for the afternoon to reveal the culprit of the Phoenix Lights.
I know where you're going.
Okay? Now, first of all, nothing before then. Then suddenly, the very morning after the USA Today article came out, it really went viral overnight. I have to tell you, by the next morning, Barwood and witnesses were on every morning show. It really went viral, so they had to do something. And anyway, he calls this press conference, and everyone took it seriously, the press included. And here he marches out, one of his aides, with a giant alien head and makes a mockery of the whole thing, which really offended, I have to say, many, many people, particularly parents that were with children, because they saw this thing go right over them. We have pilots and military in our documentary, and an artist as well, that these things went right over their heads. While I was taking the pictures at 10 o'clock, it went right over the head of one of the witnesses. And he actually looked up into the well, this giant well they would describe like a canister of swimming light. And here they're making a mockery of this. So anyway, it really was disheartening that happened. And it just fired me up all the more, because then I started calling every military base to find out what they knew. And I have to say, before and after this happened, by the way, and they were more interested in seeing my data than giving an explanation. They had no idea what it was. And they were just as curious. And I have some of those conversations, which are quite comical in the book. But about a month later, I get a call from one of the heads of PR from the Air National Guard, and she said, "Oh, Dr. Lynne, I think we know what those lights were back in March." And I was thrilled because I was looking for any logical explanation, and I said, "You do?" And she said, "Yes, do you believe that no one ever looked at the log for visiting Air National Guard?" Now, mind you, it's almost 5 months now, okay? And all this hoopla had happened that month. And we just discovered that the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off flares in Operation Snowbird, which I came to learn, by the way, means diversionary tactical maneuvers in military terms. Now, if you just take that one sentence, boy, they did their job, okay, because it's confused the issue ever since. But anyway, she said that must be what some people saw. And I said, well, now wait a minute, when was the Maryland Air National Guard in town? She said March 1st to the 15th. So I said, well, were they in town in January? She said, no. I said, are you sure? She said, absolutely, absolutely not. I said, well, I have 35-millimeter photographs of the same phenomena in the same location that I got video of on March 13th, confirmed the next morning in both cases by air traffic controllers at Sky Harbor International Airport is hovering in Class B restricted airspace at 1,000 feet altitude. And she says, you never told me that. And then I said, and besides, I said, you're trying to say that flares that cannot keep a formation, drift and drop with the wind haphazardly, traverse the entire, and this is in minutes, by the way, traverse the entire state in a rock-solid, equidistant, mile-wide V formation for hours? And she said, I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you. Well, wait, I'm still waiting.
How convenient, right?
But anyway, at that point, it was like, okay, still looking for a logical explanation. If it was military, I knew that I had not only the same phenomena captured during the mass sighting and then subsequently as well, but during the mass sighting 2 months before the mass sighting in the same location, okay? And by the way, getting back to the Gila Bend Indians, Native Americans, they actually named the Spaniards at the time, because of the history of these orbs for centuries, named the Estrellas the Estrella Mountain Range, which means star in Spanish. And they believe that there is a gateway or a portal. They call the Estrellas the gateway to the stars in that area, which, when you look at my data, may be true. But at any rate, be that as it may, it was like, fine. I knew that I had photographs not only during the mass sighting, 2 months before the mass sighting, but when we went back to the pictures in 1995, a Navy optical physicist, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, very world-renowned, very respected, came up with unbelievable conclusion to that close encounter, by the way, but which I'm now sharing in my book for the first time, that I've kept private for over a dozen years, in the latest edition of the Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone. But, I said, hey, the same phenomena is in the background 2 years before the mass sighting, too, when my husband was seeing the close orbs. And maybe, what people described during the mass sighting as these orbs detaching from the main object and going out in the environment happened in 95. We can speculate, but the bottom line is that I have photographs that are undeniable that prove that the same phenomena was in the same location at least 3 times. So whoever did it at least 3 times, so do it again, right? Well, we waited. About 3 years after the mass sighting, former Vice Mayor, Councilwoman Frances Barwitt was actually running for Secretary of State at the time on a platform to get answers for the Phoenix Lights event and asking very strongly for a reenactment. We all were. And suddenly we get the announcement right before the 3rd anniversary, actually it was March 7th, that 3 Air National Guards, I believe it was California, Michigan, and New York, came in town to show everybody the Phoenix Lights. Now, this was announced majorly, by the way, on the radio and TV and whatever. So we were ready for them, the media and the witnesses alike. And I have to tell you, if you get onto the news page on the PhoenixLights.net website and look down to the second row, there's a block there that says AZ Family 3. That's a CNN affiliate here. They have footage of that flare drop, and it was a joke. I mean, this was, it is what it is. I mean, they had their chance to reenact it or show everybody that was the Phoenix Lights, and I have to say that more than anything. When I tried to make a triangle, it was upside down. It fell apart immediately. It had huge smoke trails that were very visible to the human eye. It was really a failure for them.
Do you believe
the witnesses that it was definitely not flares? Now, going back to that show and going back to your original question, there was a show that came in town a few months later called Anatomy of a Sighting. And I thought it was going to be a very serious show, and I thought for the first time I will do an anonymous interview, but only if I can share that there's a lot more to the story and I have the evidence to prove it before the mass sighting. And immediately the producer says to me, and I have this whole conversation and what happened in my book, and immediately he doesn't even look at my pictures, and he says, well, the military said it was flares, so it was flares. I said, wait a minute, you don't understand. And I had found out by then that it was also happening worldwide and so forth, and I said, the only way I'll do this is if I can, share that there's a lot more to the story, and it is happening for a long time and worldwide, and I have data before the mass sighting. Well, the entire time the interview was only about the March 13th event, and he was unrelenting. The director was unrelenting, and I ended up on the cutting room floor, which I was very happy about, because when I saw the program, here they have all these wonderful witnesses building up to a crescendo, and then they supposedly got this lab to analyze the boomerang video. Now, mind you, the boomerang videos, the two boomerang videos were 20 minutes, a half hour after the two other videos, mine and the arrowhead. So, there is a possibility, and I will leave the door open. But what they did in this show was to show that the boomerang goes behind the mountain. Now, number one, so it was flares. That was their conclusion. Now, number one, just because it went behind the mountain doesn't mean it flares. Number one, I already had confirmation from the air traffic controllers 2 months before the mass sighting that this thing was in Class B restricted airspace and moved slowly behind South Mountain. So just because it moved behind the mountain didn't mean it was flares. It definitely wasn't flares in their expert estimation, number one. Number two, there is a Fox TV report shortly after this aired, and I have it in the bonus features of our documentary, that it's really important because the videographer, Mike Kristen, that took that video, saw immediately that there was one lone light that was separate from the 8 lights that were in that boomerang to the right of a tree that's on his property at the time. And in their program, that one lone light is on the left side of the tree. And he makes a very clear statement that somebody altered the video to conform with the mountain range to make the case for flares. Now, like I said, the data speaks for itself, so I'm not making anything up that isn't there. It's there, and all you have to do is look at the data. So that's a very poignant part of this story, too. The other part of the story is that recently, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who again he's been analyzing this case for years and analyzed my close sighting data, but he also analyzed the videos, not the arrowhead. He did not have that footage at the time in '98, but he came to the same conclusion for my video and the boomerangs, that they were totally different, in '98. But the people that read the report in the MUFON Journal at the time either disregarded it, didn't notice it, or ignored it, and just bunched all the videos around 10 o'clock as being flares. And even some ufologists that obviously haven't studied the data feed into that misinformation, because he reanalyzed my video and the boomerangs again a few months ago and came to the same conclusion. And this is his definitive result, is that my video of the 3 points of light not only does not coordinate at all in timing, because mine was before 10 o'clock, theirs was after, as well as timing of the orbs themselves, how they come on and how they go off, but also in distance, that mine is near, and again it was confirmed by air traffic controllers as being in Class B restricted airspace. Theirs, he estimates, was at a very far distance, the boomerangs, near Tucson and are most likely illumination flares at the Barry Goldwater Range. Now, that's his conclusion, and he's sticking to it. So, to answer your original question...
Sometimes you got to go deep to answer it. I wanted to ask you this, too, Doctor. This is something that's really got to me. I mean, why doesn't the government reveal this? I mean, is the public ready to hear, that we are being visited by a race of being that is not of this world? Are we ready to hear that?
Well, that's a really good question. I have to tell you that I don't even go there anymore because they have a job to do, and for whatever reason, our country is not being forthcoming. Other countries are. Many countries are now divulging that they have had these sightings. They're releasing thousands of UFO files, and we're talking France and UK and Belgium and Argentina and Brazil, et cetera, and to get it out there for scientific scrutiny, which is what we need to do. But for some reason, the United States has really put a lid on it, or even worse, they've made people feel that it's a mirage, or they're crazy, or discredited people. I mean, it was a very precarious thing for me to come forward. I mean, it took a lot of soul searching, and as an educator for 35 years in good conscience, ultimately, I couldn't stick what I had in a drawer. Plus, as a physician, I had to let people know that have had experiences that they're not alone, that it's really important and cathartic to share it, even if it's with one person. And if there's anybody out there that needs to share, because I know I've received thousands and tens of thousands of emails from people from all over the world who are afraid to talk about their experience, and that's what we've been made to feel, which is ridiculous already. I mean, there's things that are real that are happening that are unexplained. It's time we try to explain them. But at any rate, so as far as why, I think and actually astronaut Edgar Mitchell, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who's in the documentary, says it very poignantly in the bonus section as well. He talks about the cover-up and that at the time when there were a lot of sightings and around World War II and the Cold War and so forth, they were afraid that people might panic. And, whether that's why the cover-up started then or there's another reason, we have been initiated for the last 60 years with the possibility that we are being visited. And certainly a lot of the things that people saw in the skies were experimental black projects, too, which only confused the issue even more. But, at this point, I think we've really, been spoon-fed enough. And the reality is that people don't trust what's being said. And they're seeing things. I mean, now we have the Internet. Now we have Facebook, and I welcome people to join my Phoenix Lights Network page on Facebook. I have updates all the time and similar sightings worldwide, et cetera. And that's even on there. I mean, I have people in real time getting in touch with me and saying, I'm seeing these orbs in Cleveland right now. Is anybody seeing them too? I mean, that's what needs to happen. That's really cool. I mean, there really needs to be a network, and I'm working on a couple projects actually to help make that happen. Not only to have networking, and certainly Phoenix Lights Network is the first step to really get this out there and have people understand that it's okay. I mean, get out there with your camera, especially 35 millimeter, and capture these things for analysis, and also be, of course, very prudent and discerning in what you're doing. The other thing I'm working on, because I've been working on curriculum on the reality of vital health issues for 35 years, I've also felt the urgency and the purpose to also, and the passion, by the way, because I love teaching kids, to do the same for this topic.
Do you think, Doctor, that there are really UFO sightings taking place at an escalating rate, or do you believe that it's just the technology that we have nowadays that we're just capturing it more?
I think it may be both. I can't say definitively because I think that these things have been going on for centuries, that they've been with us since human documentation began. But certainly having, cell phones with cameras, having people looking up, being more aware, being less afraid to talk about it, certainly on the internet, and people can still say anonymous, and Facebook and so forth. I mean, social networking has really changed the face of what's happening.
I wanted to ask you one thing, too. It's a pretty interesting question, pretty deep. What is your blood type, if you don't mind me asking?
I'd rather not get into that.
Are you familiar with the Rh negative blood type being affiliated with, alien contacts or even individuals that are just more into the topic?
Well, there's a lot of stuff flying out there, and I again look at the data. I try to be as scientific as I can, and I'm open to look at these things. There's so much going on out there with different theories and rumors and so forth. But for my own work and endeavors, I try to hone in on the data and associate it with the Phoenix Lights. And I'm also working on, and this is another interesting aspect of this, while I was interviewing witnesses, you might find this really intriguing. I hope your audience does, because I did. There were a number of witnesses who shared with me that they had had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the mass sighting. And I found that really curious, because I did too. And I go into my near-death experience in great detail in the book, let it all out there. But what really got me is that I thought, geez, could there possibly be a connection between all unexplained phenomena, whether it's near-death experience, out-of-body experience, unexplained aerial phenomena, that have a mystical light associated with the experience. And when I started looking, again, I started finding such credible data. There's one study alone at the University of Connecticut called the Omega Project by Dr. Kenneth Ring, decades ago, really substantiates. And there's others. I mean, Dr. Raymond Fowler and a number of other very distinguished gentlemen were studying these phenomena and the connection not only in the experience itself, which is really enlightening, and I made it very simple in the book, but in the after effect, the profound awakening, the enlightenment, the positive transformation that I started calling all unexplained phenomena, UP, unexplained phenomena, and up, because they are an up. They change you forever. You feel not only an awakening and enlightenment, but a connection to the universe and to the earth and to each other that you have never felt before, and it changes you forever. I mean, I know that it's changed me, and I know that it's changed thousands, millions of people worldwide that have had these up experiences. And interestingly, too, Sean, that when we had the Phoenix Lights mass sighting, there was a immediate, in real-time transformation for people. In fact, 6 months before the mass sighting, the movie Independence Day was very popular. And when children, and we've been so inundated for so long, for so many decades, with fear, and threat, and the media and Hollywood, etc. We address this in the documentary, by the way, that our mindset, and Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is the head of the Conscious Study Department at the University of Arizona, makes a very poignant statement in the documentary that if you're afraid of something and you see something that you're frightened of, how do you think you're going to react? And kids were scared. When they saw this mile-wide V formation of lights coming towards them, they started jumping up and down, Independence Day, Independence Day. But as it got close, not only children but adults as well, a calmness took over them, a connectiveness to the phenomena itself, that when it passed by, they wanted to go chase after it or have their parents get in the car and follow it. I mean, you're talking something, that's really touching people to the core to today. I mean, I still get emails from people who are just realizing or just sharing for the first time that they saw the Phoenix Lights event, and it changed them forever. I mean, some people went into the peace movement, some went into the environmental movement, just a consciousness, a raising of consciousness that changed them forever, that, that's really important to address as well in all of this. And again, that doesn't happen with flares.
Now, there are many views on what the alien agenda could be. Do you have an opinion on that, of what it might be?
as Jim Delatoso, our chief investigator here in Phoenix at Village Labs, said in a documentary, if there's one out there, there's many. And, I have to say, excuse me, and that's why I'm sharing the data that Dr. Bruce Maccabee discovered from my close sighting in 1995. He analyzed the first and the last picture that I took and realized that unlike what my husband and I thought were just minutes that passed, you can see right in the pictures, again, the data speaks for itself, that the skyline changes significantly, and that doesn't happen in just a couple minutes. And he actually presented the case, and he had me do a whole experiment and all that. I talk about that in the book now. And his 21-page report is on the website, thephoenixlights.net. But the reason that I'm sharing it now, because he presented the case, and I stayed anonymous again for 7 years. Nobody knew that it was me until I came forward with it last year. At the 1999 MUFON, Mutual UFO Network International Symposium in Washington, D.C., as the first authenticated photographic evidence ever of missing time. And I still can't wrap my head around it, but I have to tell you that the more and more quantum physics and quantum mechanics is starting to catch up and talk about string theory, bubble theory. There could be 10 or 11 different dimensions out there. And again, I don't believe in coincidence. I thought maybe it's important to share this data because maybe it'll help. Maybe it'll help us realize that linear time, our concept of time, of past, present, and future, is not really what time is at all. And also that if there are other times and spaces along with ours, then why is it such a leap to think that there may be other intelligences in those other times and spaces that we get glimpses of if we're open to them or invited? So there could be many things out there, and many things along with us right now that we're just not seeing unless they want us to, or unless we capture them. Actually, if you go on the photo page on the phoenixlights.net, the last couple pictures are of sunsets, and on two different rolls. Now, I did not see this when I was taking the sunsets. I collect sunsets. I have like 4 or 5, 6 books of sunsets, beautiful sunsets here in Arizona. But in two different rolls, in November and December of 2000, there is a massive rod-shaped object. And, of course, we've heard about cigar-shaped or rod-shaped objects as a mothership worldwide that are being recorded and witnessed in the same place on 2 different months in the negative. So I did not see it when I was looking, but they're there. And we also have people who have reported these rod-shaped, massive cigar-shaped objects over Superstition Mountains and other areas of Arizona that have orbs or craft coming out from them. In fact, there are Navajo Rangers upstate that have come forward recently, are now working with MUFON to investigate these things, and they too were sharing that they've seen these huge rod-shaped objects. So, they're here. We just don't see them unless we're open to them or invited, or now, we just don't have the technology yet to definitively define what these things are, but that doesn't mean they're not real. We may just be looking under the AM dial for an FM frequency. So that's why I think that's why at the beginning when I said it's so important to get this out in the open and address it, accept it, and study it so we can move forward and find out who's driving these things as well as in our own evolution, because we are right at the precipice of learning that we're not alone in the universe. And that's going to be a giant step, just as it was when we learned that the world was not flat, which was only, a few centuries ago.
Right, amazing.
Right.
Dr. Lynne, we're just about out of time here, but I wanted to ask you, where can people actually get your movies? Is it your website, your documentary? Do you sell it there? How can they see this in your book?
I appreciate that. Well, first of all, the website, thephoenixlights.net, is totally free, and it's packed with information. I really invite people and urge them to take a look, learn and grow as I have, because it's fascinating. If you choose to, it is a choice. Everyone comes from a different background, different upbringing, different belief system, and some people can't deal with this, and some people don't want to, and if they want to feed into a flare theory, that's okay. Everyone in their own time. But the information is there, as well as my book. I mean, The Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone, was a 750-page journal that I squeezed the best of what I found after 7 years. And the latest edition on what's happened since I came forward in 2004 is either on the website or Amazon.com actually has the best discount. And it's everywhere, in bookstores and Kindle and so forth, and Nook and Barnes & Noble, and the documentary is as well. And I just invite people to take a look at it and then decide for themselves.
Doctor, I want to appreciate you taking your time to come on here, and I wanted to apologize if anybody hears a little dog yapping in the background. It is my neighbor's dog. I'm not used to broadcasting this early. So, yes, I'm getting people in the chat room right now. Are your dogs barking? No. If my dogs were barking, they would be very low. They're as big as wolves.
Oh, maybe they're just saying hi and letting us know that we are not alone. And I hope people just keep looking up and take a look at the information. It's really fascinating, if nothing else. And please join me at Phoenix Lights Network Facebook page if you're on Facebook. It's lots of fun, and I love to hear from people.
Doctor, I appreciate you taking your time, and you have a good night, or a good afternoon, I should say.
Thank you so much. Keep looking up.
All right, good night.